Hello, everyone. Welcome. Started a little early to give everyone a chance to get their sound working. If you want to head over to the chat and chat to everyone, we'd love to hear where you're coming from today, where you're watching from. And if you have students in your classroom with you, we'd love to know what grade level they are, how many are watching. Go over and introduce yourself and your class in the chat. And we will give it 7 minutes before we start. Welcome everyone who's joining. Go ahead and tell us where you're coming from in the chat. If you're with students, tell us what grade level and how many students are watching with you. Welcome everyone. So happy to see all the classrooms watching with us. Everybody get their questions ready for Brian. Oh, Brian, you got to chat that to everyone. Welcome, Brian. Welcome, everyone. Tell us where you're coming from. Tell us how many students you have with you, what grades. Give it a few minutes to get everyone's sound up. If anyone saw the question about captions, it might look different from my side, but on my side, I see it in the more option. So if anyone sees it differently, if they can put that in the chat. All right, everyone. Welcome to everyone who's just joining. Great to see so many young people from all over the country watching and other countries. Tell us where you're coming from in the chat. Tell us how many students you're with. Welcome, everyone. We'll get started in 2 minutes. Okay, one more time. Welcome everyone who just joined. You can go over to the chat and tell us where you're coming from and tell us how many students are watching with you. Tell us what grade you're with right now, if you're with young people. Wonderful. Welcome, everyone. Make sure you are chatting to everyone instead of just hosts and panelists. All right. It is time to begin. Welcome, everyone. I am Kaya Heisey from Mackin Educational Resources. We're so happy to be able to bring you the Storyteller Spotlight series. And we're so excited today to have Brian Selznick on with us. The intention of Storyteller Spotlight is to bring class visits into classes all over the country and even the world, and to get your students to really interact with authors. So we're so excited. Today, we want to give a special thanks to Scholastic for helping set this up. And let me quickly introduce Brian. So Brian Selznick is one of the most innovative storytellers of our time. As many of you know, his books have sold millions of copies, garnered countless awards worldwide, have been translated into more than 35 languages, made into big movies. He and his husband divide their time between Brooklyn, New York, and La Jolla, California. We are so excited to welcome Brian today.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Kaya. Thank you so much for that introduction.
Brian's going to start by showing us his new book and doing a short read aloud, and then we will transfer into the Q&A. We'd love you to use the Q&A button to put your questions in. The chat is too hard for me to keep up with, so go to the Q&A, find that little bar, click on the Q&A, and that's where you'll put your questions in. But don't start yet, because we're going to first hear from Brian, and then you'll see me come back, and then we'll start our Q&A.
All right. Amazing. I got to look at the chat a little bit as everybody was signing in, and I'm so thrilled to see people coming from all over the world and so many places that I've been. Aloha, Hawaii, and Minnesota, and New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, and New York, and Texas and so many places that I have not been. And so it's really, really exciting to be able to join with you here through this wonderful event with Mackin and Scholastic for helping to set all of this up. I'm really, really grateful to be a part of this. And I thought that I would just, for a few minutes, read a tiny little bit from my new book, Big Tree. I know a lot of you are currently reading some of my books. I read that there's a class that's reading The Invention of Hugo Cabret right now, which is really amazing. And I'll tell you a little bit about the new book. We're here in my studio in New York, so you can see I've got lots of stuff, and I've got show and tell prepared. And so I really just want to answer whatever questions you have for me. So I'm going to just start by telling you that Big Tree is about 2 little tiny sycamore seeds. Here are, let's see, can you see these? I prepared these 2. Here's, hold on. If you look very, very closely, those are 2 actual, oh, one of them flew away, 2 actual sycamore seeds. And they are the main characters in my new book, Big Tree. One of the seeds is named Louise, and one of the seeds is named Merwin. And sycamore seeds have been around, and sycamore trees have been around for a very long time. They've been around since before the time of the dinosaurs. And so I don't know if you knew that about sycamore trees. So if you see a sycamore tree, you are looking at something that has essentially been alive since, almost the beginning of time, it seems like. And so I wrote a story about these 2 little sycamore seeds who are trying to find a safe place to grow. And the story takes place at the very, very end of the dinosaur era, right before the meteorite crashes into the earth and causes the death of most species on earth, including all of the dinosaurs. And the story is about these 2 seeds, one of whom is trying to, Merwin is very, serious, and he's trying to make sure that he and his sister find a safe place to grow. But Louise is a dreamer, and she is hearing voices, and the stars come to her in her dreams and whisper mysterious things to her that she's trying to decipher. And so it's sort of like a scientist and a poet are trying to figure out how to save themselves. And then once they realize that the earth is in danger, how to also save the earth. So I just want to read you a very, very short part of this book, Big Tree, a little conversation between Merwin and his sister. When sycamore seeds are first born, created, they exist in a seed ball with hundreds of other seeds. And it's only when that seed ball is released and all the seeds become separate and head off into the world that they then go and try to find a place to grow. So this is the scene that takes place while the 2 seeds are still in the seed ball. And Louise is the only seed who's too small to reach the surface of the seed ball, so she can't see anything. So she relies on her brother Merwin to describe the world to her, and then she tells him about the dreams that she has. So this is from Big Tree. And we're going to start with Louise, who says, Merwin, what if I don't want to be a tree? And then Merwin says, what are you talking about? And she says, what if I want to be a star or a bird when I grow up? Or what's that other thing you were describing? What thing? That big sparkling thing with the point. And Merwin says, the mountain? Yes, the mountain. Describe it to me again. You know what it looks like. Please, Merwin. It's big and green. It reaches up to the sky. It can touch the sky? Yes. Well, that's what I want to be when I grow up. What? A beautiful mountain that can touch the sky. And then Merwin says, we can't be mountains when we grow up. And Louise says, why not? And he says, because we're trees, Louise. Well, yes, I know that, she said. What type of tree do you want to be? I'm not sure what type of tree I want to be. We're sycamore seeds. We don't have a choice. Hmm, maybe, but I don't know if that's what the stars are saying. And then Merwin says, stars can't talk. And Louise says, they can in dreams. And so the rest of the story takes place from there. Some of you may have read it, some of you may not have yet. If you haven't read it, I hope that you enjoy the rest of the book. And I'm very, very happy to talk about anything that you want to talk about, my process, how I make a book, how I think of a book, the research that I do. So let's open it up to the questions so that we can get this conversation going. Hi, Kaya.
Hi, Brian. That was great. Thank you. All right. So I am going to turn off my camera, but I will be the one to ask questions, put them in the Q&A, and I will put them over. Please put the name of the student that asked the question or names, so we can share that with Brian. All right, here we go. First question is, Ava wants to know how many books you've written.
Hi, Ava. I have written a lot of books. Over here in my studio, I don't know, can you see this shelf right here? That's every book I've ever made, including the book covers that I've done. These are the Harry Potter books that I did the covers for the 20th anniversary. And so in total, I think I've worked on about 35 or 40 different books. And I've written, most of those are illustrated for other writers, but I've probably written about, I don't know, 10, 8 to 10 books myself, maybe a little bit fewer, but around there. So that was a good first question. Thanks so much for asking, Ava.
Jack is wondering, what was your favorite childhood book?
Oh, Jack, hi. So one of my favorite, I had several favorite books when I was a kid. Actually, I think I have one right over here. Let me see. Here's one. And then I also have this book right here, which I'm gonna pull for you. So this is this is one of my favorite books. It's called 13. It's by Remy Charlap and by Jerry Joyner. And Remy Charlap also did a great book called Fortunately, and a lot of books. But what's amazing about this book tells 13 stories all at the same time. And so when you open the book, see here, it says 13. And oh, look, there's a little leaf that's a little bit like a butterfly that's falling and falling. Here's the table of contents with all the stories. And this is the 13 stories. Each of these pictures is a different story, including what happens on the next page. So this was my favorite story over here. It begins, this is a very old ship. And then you turn the page and you can see each of the stories has moved to the next moment. And this was, in fact, it's so old it can hardly float anymore. And you get to see what's going to be on the next page. And the story continues like that. And it's really, really amazing. And it's also all about the excitement of what happens when you turn the page, which I always really love. And then I'm going to tell you one of my favorite books that I didn't actually have when I was a kid. I didn't know about it till I was older, but it's a book I think that all of you will know. And it's a book that's very important to me called Where the Wild Things Are. And in fact, if you look on my wall over here, I have the Wild Rumpus from the book on my wall. It's not the actual paintings that Maurice Sendak did, but it's copies that I bought because I wanted to always work beneath the Wild Rumpus. And so this book has always been very, very important to me, even though I didn't really know it when I was a kid. I came to it a little bit when I was a little bit older, but I still love it very, very much. All right. Thanks, Jack. What's our next question?
Sahar is asking, how many times do you usually revise a book before it's done?
Oh, that's a really good question. I don't know if I could count that high. I know probably a lot of you, when you're doing writing in school, you probably have to do rough drafts or sloppy copies, they're called sometimes. And sometimes your teacher will ask you to do one or two drafts of your story. And I know when I was a kid, I always got very frustrated when my teacher had me do anything more than once, because, you know, I don't think anybody really likes doing anything more than once. But of course, you know, your teacher is giving you suggestions and notes, trying to help you make your story or your report or whatever it is better. And so when I'm working on my stories, I probably sometimes do hundreds of drafts. And I'm not exaggerating. And I'm not just talking about I'm not just talking about the writing, I'm talking about the pictures as well. This is a notebook that I made when I was working on Big Tree. And inside Big Tree is every one of the little sketches that I made while I was working on the book. And so these sketches here, which I'll pull some out for you, are sort of how I begin to think about the drawings. But you see these arrows? They indicate that I decided after I drew them that maybe they should move around. Maybe this one should go over here. Maybe this one should go here. And maybe this one should go over here. So I'm constantly changing all of these around. And then I change them so much that sometimes I'm not sure exactly what they're going to be like in the book. And so I make these little tiny versions of the book, which are called dummies. And these are how I learn about what happens when you turn the page. Remember when I showed you the book 13, I was showing how fun it is to turn the page. So this is a little dummy from Big Tree, but I do something like this in every single book. And this allows me to be able to see what happens when you turn the page. And this is just one picture sequence, like one wild rumpus in Big Tree. And so you can see what happens when you turn the pages in the book. And then here you can see that every one of these is one of those little book dummies that I made for Big Tree. So this is it's a lot of work doing all of these little it's sort of like a way to help me think, right? I need to get the idea down on the paper somehow. And I know a lot of times we think when we make a mark on a paper, if we draw or if we write, it has to be perfect. But it's really important to forget about the idea of being perfect and just to get your ideas down, because once you get them down, then you can work on them and polish them and try to make them better and better, which is what your teacher is talking to you about when they're giving you suggestions or feedback or notes on your story. And what my editor is trying to do when I'm working with them. And this same process happens with the writing, where I write down my ideas, I try to make them better, I try to pick the best words, and then I show it to my editor, and my editor tries to help me make the story better. So I guess the answer to your question is a lot.
Okay, Ian from Baton Rouge asks, what inspired you to write Big Tree?
Oh, that's a very, very good question. And Big Tree started in a very unusual way, because most of my books that I write start, I'm holding this, if you see some of my hands like to hold things. And so this is the pencil that I do all the drawings with my book in. Whenever they're black and white, I work with this kind of mechanical pencil, and then you can change the lead and sharpen it. And so that's what's in my hand right now. And so usually when I'm working on a book and it's something I'm writing, it's coming from an idea that I have because I'm curious about something, right? Like if there's a story that I hear, or an anecdote, or some research, or a piece of history, or a place that I really love that I want to know more about, I will often make a book so that I can spend time learning about that place or that thing or that story. And then I'll think of fictional characters, I'll think of fictional things, and I'll blend them with the real. That's really how I've made a lot of my books. But Big Tree actually started from somebody else's idea. And as I said, that's very unusual for me. I got a call from a very famous movie director named Steven Spielberg, who you may have heard of. He made Jaws, and he made Indiana Jones and Jurassic Park and so many fantastic world-changing movies. And he wanted me to write a movie for him. He had an idea. And his idea was to make a movie about nature from nature's point of view. All he said was, I want it to be about plants. And at first I thought, like, no one can make a movie like that's just about plants, because plants don't talk, and they're not people, or they're not animals that you can make a little bit like people. They don't have faces. But we had a really, really exciting meeting. And I had the idea to maybe set this story during the prehistoric era. And I did a lot of research, and Mr. Spielberg got very excited about it. And we ended up working on this as a movie for like 3 years. But then the pandemic hit, and so many things changed during the pandemic, and it became very clear for many different reasons that we weren't going to be able to make the movie at that time. But I had come up with these characters of Merwin and Louise, and this adventure and the dreams and the meteorite and the dinosaurs, and I didn't want to let that go. So I knew that Mr. Spielberg really loved my books. That's why he called me to work with him. And so I said, what if I made the story into a book first? And he got very excited. There's another producer named Chris Meledandri, and he got very excited. And so that's how I ended up turning this story that was going to be a movie into a book. But the funny thing is that now I feel like the story was always meant to be a book, because when it was going to be a movie, I wasn't really going to do any of the drawings. I was just going to be telling the story. But when it was time to do the book, I got to do all the drawings. And so who knows, maybe one day it'll be a movie. But I feel like this book was waiting the whole time to be made. So that's how Big Tree became a book.
We have lots of questions about your inspirations. One from one class who says, what inspired you to be an author illustrator, or an authorstrator, as our class calls it?
Authorstrator, I love it. I've never heard that word before. It's really good. I did not want to be an authorstrator when I was a kid. I was someone who always drew. My mom is watching right now in New Jersey. Hi, Mom. And I drew all the time, and my mom and my dad and everyone at school was very supportive of the fact that I wanted to draw. But I was told very often as a young person that for my job, I should write and illustrate children's books. And you know how sometimes when you're a kid and an adult tells you to do something, it maybe makes you not want to do that thing. So because adults were telling me that I should make children's books, I definitely did not want to make children's books. But after I got out of college, I was really thinking about what I most love to do. And the things I most love to do are to write and to draw. And I've always liked kids. And so I thought, oh no, I think those grown-ups were right. And I should be a writer and an illustrator. So I got a job at a children's bookstore in New York called Eeyore's Books for Children. So for anyone who's tuning in today from New York City, I used to work on the Upper West Side at this amazing bookstore. It was one of the first bookstores for children in the country. And I decided that that's what I wanted to do. I realized that's what I wanted to do. And my first book, The Houdini Box, was published while I was still working there. And now I'm very, very proud that I am a writer and illustrator of books for kids.
Reagan is wondering what you like best about being a writer.
Wow, I just have to say these questions are really fantastic. Thank you, everybody. I think there's a lot of things I really like about my job. I get to travel. I get to see new places. If I'm doing, like when I was doing the book Wonderstruck, my husband and I got to travel to Minnesota to learn about the real place where I wanted the character to be. If you go to the Museum of Natural History, which is one of my favorite places on Earth, there's a wolf diorama that I was doing research about. I got to go to Paris 3 times when I was researching Hugo. I got to go to London and live there for a little while I was working on a book called The Marvels. For Big Tree, I got to meet all of these amazing people who were experts in different aspects of the science of the book. And so that's another thing I really love, is getting to talk to experts, right? I I am often writing about things that I don't know very much about. And so I have to learn about them. And for me, getting to learn new things is always really exciting. And so uh, you are identified right now as students, right? Because you're all in school. But for me, I, in many ways, even though I haven't been in school for a long time, I consider myself a student still. And I love being a student because it means I get to learn and ask people who know more than me to help me learn things. I also really love telling stories. It's hard work. Like I do spend a lot of time feeling frustrated. Sometimes I worry that the story isn't going to come together. Sometimes I get sad. I don't know if you guys, I'm guessing that a lot of you sometimes when you're writing feel frustrated, or whatever your project is that you're working on, whether it's for school or for yourself. Sometimes it's frustrating, right? And a lot of times we want to give up and we want to throw it out. And I just find that if I take a little break, sometimes you need to step away from your desk and come back and keep working, that something will happen. Something new will appear to you. You'll get a better idea. You'll get a new idea. You'll figure out what happens next in the story. But it's work. You know, it definitely. I'm sitting here at my desk in New York. I also live part-time in San Diego. And so, you know, I have a desk there like this one. And even when I'm frustrating, I remember how much I love my job, or I'm frustrated, I remember how much I love my job. And I eventually am able to keep going and work on it. And my books take a long time. Like on average, my books take 3 to 5 years. So it's a big commitment, right? So I have to really be writing and illustrating something that I really love and that I really want to know more about, because it's going to take up a big part of my life. So I hope that answers your question.
Asher is wondering, if you were a character from one of your books, which would you be?
I'm laughing. I'm laughing because I never think I'm a character in my books, right? I always think I'm making everybody up. I'm going to write a story about an orphan who is able to fix clocks, and he meets he's got no one, and he's very lonely, and he meets a very mean old man. Or I'm writing a book about, these two seeds, and one of them is very scientific and thinks they're always right, and one of them is very dreamy and very open to the world and curious. And I always find out when I'm finished with the book that everybody is me. I'm the kid who's feeling lonely and not sure what to do. And I'm sometimes I'm the mean old man and I get very angry about things. Sometimes I think I'm right and no one can convince me I'm wrong, even though I'm usually wrong in those points. And but sometimes I'm the dreamy person who hears voices and likes to be open to the world. So in a lot of ways, everybody in the books they all have something to do with me. Again, even though that's not how I'm thinking when I'm making the book, I'm just trying to make stuff up.
I have a question. How old were you when you wrote your first story?
I was probably about the age that most of you are who are watching today. I know you're probably a wide range, but I'm guessing I was probably in elementary school. And I don't actually remember writing stories for school, like as an assignment, but I remember writing stories with my friends and writing stories for myself. I did like to read a lot when I was a kid, and I remember really liking fantasy stories. And I remember a story that I wrote when I was about 11 or 12, 10, 11, about an underwater city. I wrote a story about horses with wings and horns, whatever those are called, unicorns and Pegasuses combined. In high school, I wrote a story about two kids who discover they can fly. Um, so those kinds of fantasy stories were very important to me. It was also very much what I was reading. And so and in terms of drawing, like I remember I've always made things. I've always drawn. When I was very little, I used to make sculptures out of tinfoil. I used to, I remember drawing in kindergarten and having the other kids sort of gather around me and look at what I was drawing. So it feels like it's been my whole life.
Bentley asked, what happens when you mess up?
That's a very good question, Bentley. And there's no one answer, right? Because sometimes what happens when I mess up is I feel bad and I stop working for a little while, right? I said earlier, I take a break, I come back. And then a lot of times I realize that the thing I thought I had messed up, I can either fix or save, or it works in a way that I didn't know. But sometimes it doesn't, right? And I try not to throw anything completely away, because many times something that doesn't work right now, if you put it away, and sometimes even if you forget about it and you go back to it later, sometimes even years later, it might provide something helpful for you, or it might be wonderful suddenly, or you might see it differently. So I try to never actually throw anything out completely, but I do give myself room to feel sad, right? It's okay to feel sad. It's okay to feel frustrated. But I try to, as I said, to always make sure that I go back to what it is that I was working on, and just keep going. Really, that's the main thing, is like to figure out how, even when I mess up, even when I feel frustrated, even when I feel like the story doesn't work, or I wrote a bad sentence, or I can't find the right word, or the picture doesn't look good, or the face doesn't look the way I want it to look, I always think about allowing myself to feel bad. That's okay. But then making sure I go back and work. That's what I do.
Can you show us a few pictures from the book before we end?
Oh, yes. So what would be the best way to do that? I think the best way to do that is maybe I can just open up to the beginning of Big Tree and I can show you a little bit about how the pages turn, like I was describing to you. So when Big Tree starts, right, you open it, right before it, it just says like chapter 1, the stars. And then you see all these stars. And then when you turn the page, look at there's all this white space, and all it says is hello, stars. And you don't know who's talking, you don't know where we are, but you see now the moon, right? So something has changed. And then on the next page, it says, I thought I heard you calling me, right? And you can talk amongst yourselves after my discussion about why you think I left all of this white space. What happens on a page when there's just one line? And then something is happening here that's different, right? And then we turn the page and there's a little bit more text. And then we turn, and now the sun is rising. And so as you move through, remember we were talking about a mountain earlier, there's the mountain. As you move through the pages, the story and the pictures keep changing, right? So there's Mama Tree, and then you keep going, and we move closer to the tree, and then eventually we move up the tree. We follow this little insect, and we go here, right? Here's the seed ball I was describing earlier. And then we get closer and closer to the seed ball until the story continues, right? So Merwin and Louise, in my mind, this one's Merwin, and Louise is down there in that black hole, because remember I said she's too small to see. So to see out of the top of the hole. So so that's a little bit about, you know, how I work on the drawings.
Well, we're unfortunately all out of time.
Oh no, I want to keep going.
I know we had so many questions we didn't get answered, but I will get all your questions over to Brian so he can see how much work you all put into asking really excellent questions. And now is a great time to go into the chat and thank Brian for joining us today. And just as a reminder, next month, we're going to have Margarita Engel. So please sign up. That's January 10th, and reserve it with your class. And thank you so much, Brian. Everyone have a wonderful day.
Thank you all so much. It was really amazing to be with you. And thank you to everyone who's reading my books. And thank you to all the teachers and librarians and educators and parents who are getting my books to you. And if I mentioned any books you haven't read, I hope you enjoy them. And if you want to be a writer or an illustrator, just keep working. And thank you so much for joining us here today.
Bye, everyone.